Hey, what is up guys, Curdog here, and today we are going to be making the Kylo Ren helmet from Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Alright, so today guys, as you've all seen and can guess from the intro videos, today we're going to be making another part of my Kylo Ren costume for Halloween. Now I'm actually recording this voiceover after Halloween, the helmet's done, the costume was great, it worked out perfectly, and you'll get a sneak peek of it at the end of this video. But today we're going to be focusing on the helmet. Now, the version of the helmet we're going to be building is the Rise of Skywalker helmet, which is coming out December, so we're going to be doing the whole red cracks, showing how it was broken and then put back together. So stick around, we're going to get started. Now, as you've seen from the trailer images in the Rise of Skywalker, the helmet was put back together even though it was completely smashed in The Last Jedi. So now it has these awesome red forge cracks that you can see. I don't know if that's it from it being welded or glued, however you want to call it, but put back together. So we're going to include those on our build. For the base of this helmet, I decided I wanted to go a cheap route. Now, I thought about trying to get the Hasbro Black Series and just painting it, doing a custom paint job, but that was going to be way too expensive, and what I found out is that I could use this cheap $20 Rubies 2-piece adult mask to build a helmet of my own that, by the time I'm finished, is not only going to be cheaper than the Black Series helmet, but in my view is going to be fairly close in quality in terms of accuracy and just overall quality. So for the bang for your buck, this is the route I would recommend you going. Now, this helmet does have a few of its own problems. As you can see in the stock version, it doesn't line up the way it should, and it looks very much like a toy, but don't worry, we're going to be going through and fixing all that as we go through the build. The first step is where the helmet actually goes together, there is Velcro, and that's part of the reason why it doesn't look like it lines up, why it looks like one part is jutted out above the rest. When you remove that Velcro and actually place the helmet pieces together, as you can see me doing in the video, it actually tends to stick together pretty well. It lines up, the lines are almost smooth, and so what our first step is going to be is to take all the Velcro off, line the helmet up the way we think it should fit, and then we are going to use some crazy glue to put it together. Now, one thing you want to be careful of as you're going through and gluing the helmet together, you don't want to let the glue leak through to the side that shows any more than you have to. Whatever does leak through, you're going to wind up having to sand off later, and it's going to be a pain. So be really careful, wipe up any excess that does go through, and then you'll be good to go. Alright, so today I'm going to be continuing up on the Kylo Ren mask. This is the Kylo Ren Rubies helmet. It's a toy version. This is the adult size. Costs about $26 from Amazon or Target. But what I'm doing is modifying it and making it look much more like the real movie. To start, I took it comes in 2 pieces which are attached by Velcro, which doesn't really add up right. It looks weird, doesn't line up the way it should. So I peeled the Velcro off and then glued it back, attached it to where those seams were, so it lays a lot flatter. And so once I did that, the finished result of that looked about like this. So it's been super glued together, but I haven't touched up the seam at all on this side. So that's about what that looks like. Now, that's a good start, but I'm not really happy with that. I want it to look a lot smoother, and since I plan on repainting the helmet anyway, I decided I would do some sanding. So, flip to the other side. This is what it looks like sanded down. So up top, you can see the seam is starting to disappear right here. In fact, the only reason you can see it up here is because there's some spots where the glue didn't stick. But down the side, it's not quite lined up perfectly. There's some gaps, but that was just the way it had to fit together to get it to look right. So I'm going to use some Gorilla Glue to fill that in and then sand it smooth. Now on top I've already done that, and so to show you the finished product of that, it's right there. So you can see, you can just barely see where the seam was, but if you run your hand across it, you can't feel a seam, you can't feel any difference in the texture from one side to the other. So once it's painted, you won't even be able to see that anymore. So I'm really happy with how that's turning out, and you can see that right there. But so today I'm going to show you how to fill in this side, how to fill in the gaps, and then I'm also going to be showing you how to sand the other side. Now that process will take a while, so that'll probably be a time lapse, but that'll just depend on how I have to edit it. But without further ado, let's get started. So to start, I'm gonna take some of the Gorilla Glue and the seams in the gap right here. I'm gonna fill all those up with the Gorilla Glue and let it harden, and then once that's done, I'll be able to sand it smooth to where you won't see the gaps, and so it'll look almost just like the top when I'm done, hopefully. Let that dry for a little bit. The next part of the build to focus on is the paint job. With the helmet all sanded, now it's time to start painting. So right now, as you can see, I masked off and taped off all the black parts of the helmet so that we could paint the silver lines onto his helmet. The silver that was on the helmet originally, I just didn't like. It didn't look good enough. So I went ahead, painted it silver, and then I taped over that part so that we could paint the rest of the helmet where I sanded a darker, more filling black. I also selected Rust-Oleum Hammered as the paint that I wanted to use to create this texture because it gives it a hammered metal look that much more closely matches the look from the film. So that's what we're going with here. As you can see, I'm just trying to give you a good look of what the helmet looked like before the paint job and then after. So as you can see right now, we're getting a good look at what the paint job looks like now after the paint's been applied. Here you can really see that texture that I was talking about earlier. It much more closely matches that of the film, but it also gives it kind of a hammered metal look that I think makes it look more realistic. Even though the helmet itself is just plastic in this build, this paint job really helps to bring out the metal look to it. Alright, so here's a look at the helmet with the original paint jobs done. As you can see, you have that nice bright silver and then a bright metallic black. So this is about the halfway point. If we were going for a Force Awakens or Last Jedi build, then that right there might be a decent stopping spot, but we're not. We're going full on Rise of Skywalker, so now it's time for the finishing touches. The finishing touches of this helmet are going to be adding the cracked red. We're going to be using a red acrylic to add that texture and look to it. But first I went through and took an awl, one of my tools I use for my leather work, and actually scratched into the surface the crack. So if you run your hands across the surface of it, you can actually feel the crack. So now after these have been scratched on, I used the reference material that we had available from the trailer, a few toys, and a couple other images. But I took that, marked on the scratches with my awl, and now we're going to go in and fill those cracks with the red acrylic paint. And it actually turned out a lot better, even better than what I was hoping for. It really filled in the cracks, but kind of was easy to wipe off of the rest, so it gave it a textured look and more of a three-dimensional look than I could have hoped for. So I'm really proud of how that turned out. Alright, now with the cracks all painted and everything almost ready, there's a few more details to add. The very last detail that we're going to add as far as paint is some weathering. So what I used to weather the material, I took some gunmetal gray paint that I had left over from the last world build. So if you've seen that video, you'll know what paint I'm talking about. But I took what little paint of that I had left and a worn out brush that I had and decided to try my hand at dry brushing. Dry brushing is a technique where you get as little paint on the brush as possible and then go over certain areas to highlight them. If you're looking to make it look like you're weathered, you got to be real careful about how you do it. Go through, try and match the pattern. So I took some images from the broken helmet that we saw at the beginning of this video in the film The Last Jedi. I took some stills from that and I used them as reference images to go through and add some dark wear on the front and bottom parts of the mask. I think it turned out really well, but I just used some gunmetal gray and a very worn out brush with as little paint on it as possible, and then I went over all the highlight areas, tried to make it as worn down and scratched looking as possible. The final little bit of extra work I did is I took some black cloth fabric that I had left over. I thinned it down a few layers to where it was possible to see through, but it wasn't easy, so that no one looking in could see it, but you could kind of see out of it. I used that, super glued it to the inside of the mask to make my visor. And there's a look at the finished product. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about this build, what I did, what materials I used, any of that, go ahead and add it down at the bottom. Thank you so much. Peace out.